I get a moment of your time? Well, alright. Bankhead, I see you, partner. From the interviews to the news to your favorite tunes, you cannot lose when you're tuned into Straight Out the Trunk Radio. Hit me, From the interviews to the news, what's your favorite tune? Straight out the trunk, they got what you want, Get your body to go to sleep, and when you brush your teeth, when you first wake up, turn your radio up. Straight out the trunk Straight out the trunk, You are now listening to Straight Out the Trunk. Put your seat back, turn your radio up. It's Straight Out the Trunk. You are now tuned in and you're rocking with the best. Straight Out the Trunk. Everybody tuned in, let me hear you say Straight Out the Trunk. 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 Straight out the trunk.
What up, y'all? It's your boy Red Eye, and this is Straight Out the Trunk Radio. This is my first official interview in the headquarters. I have here with me owner of the comic book den located on 4912 West Slauson Avenue between Slauson and Fairfax, Josef Woods.
What up, yo?
How you been doing, sir?
I've been doing well, my man. Just hanging in there, selling these comic books, bro.
How did you get your start, collecting comic books?
To tell you the truth, it's a long story, man. I grew up over in Watts. So when my mom first got her house over there, we walked to the mom and pop store around the corner, which was called the Mama Store at that time, which is now, all these years later, called the Watts Up Market. Much love to the Sisters of Watts. And I got my first comic book there, because back in the days, in the early 70s, there used to be a spinner racks inside the stores. You go to your local mom and pop store, you see spinner racks. So I got my first comic book from there, and honestly, man, it was hook, line, and sinker from there for me, man. I just never turned back. I just loved the art, and then as I got older and I matured, I got into my favorite artists, and then I got to reading story arcs, and no matter what I did, I just got into the passion through all the Bloods and the Crips and the gang violence and stuff like that. I just kept a passion for comic books, which kept me out of a lot of trouble.
I hear that. I use video games to keep me out of trouble.
Yeah, there you go, bro.
What was your first comic that you ever bought?
Well, my first comic that I remember, was because I think that comic book I bought at that one time was a Marvel team up. That's when Spider-Man used to team up with different type of characters and stuff like that. And from what I remember, I think it was Captain Britain on the cover up there.
Oh, Captain Britain.
Yeah, because I remember they were like going through this little struggle and stuff like that. And but then I started to look more at black characters. So when I first saw Luke Cage with the yellow shirt, with the tiara, with the chains on, I thought he was a pretty cool looking guy. You know what I'm saying? So I started paying attention more into like black characters, which it really wasn't that many out. So,
no, it wasn't.
But what really drew me in, honestly, that got me hooked was probably like the Uncanny X-Men. Watching the X-Men, looking at the art, seeing characters like Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler. And the thing about that is that, if you got to reading their books, they were being treated as like outsiders, outcasts and stuff like that. But it showed diversity because you had a Russian, you had an African, you had a guy that was pretty much Irish, you had an Indian on the team. You had a very diverse team, but they were all looked at in a form of prejudice because they were mutants.
Yeah. I made that connection because everybody accepts Captain America. Captain America got the super soldier serum. He has all these powers, but somebody like Cyclops, they look down on because he was born with his powers.
Yeah, and it was something about that, and just something about the Mutants period where they just ended a great story arc by a guy Jonathan Hickman, and Jerry Duggan took over the Uncanny X-Men that was about the Krakoa era. And what the Krakoa era kind of reminded me of was like the Mutants having their own Black Wall Street, you know what I'm saying? Because they had their own island, and what they did was they said, okay, we're in our own paradise, we have our own, but what we're going to do is we're going to offer, the states cures to medicine and different type of things that was going to help the United States. But instead of them embracing that, they wanted to find a way to destroy that, to infiltrate, to find out why they had these accesses to resurrection protocols, all these cures to these different diseases and stuff like that. Instead of the state embracing it and saying, okay, come on, you guys got your own. We always wanted you guys separated from us anyway, But now that we finally got our own, and we show this to you guys, they just said, okay, no, we don't like this now. We want to take what you have. And that's how the whole Krakoa era rose and fall, because of how how they got their own, but then the United States tried to take it.
Yeah, the X-Men, the story is very uncanny from what we dealt with, like how they have Magneto and Professor X. They modeled them off of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Yeah. Like, it's just very uncanny, and it's like it tells a lot how they were treated compared to how we were treated also.
Exactly, because a guy like Magneto, he got a history for being mistreated because I believe he's Jewish,
Yeah, he was in the Holocaust.
Yeah, he was in the concentration camps, and he feels he still burns with that hurt and that pain, which was kind of like, if you ever analyze the average supervillain, if you really just look at him, I mean, besides just being a mad, evil guy, some of those villains really have a purpose behind what they stood for, drive to make them go for the things that they were going for, you know. And it was usually because of a hurt or something that took place that kind of hurt them deep on the inside, and they never saw no improvement in the world. So they said, well, maybe if the world was more like this, then maybe we would have a better understanding. But that sometimes is always looked at as being like the bad guy or the evil guy or something like that.
Yeah, and and it's like growing up, I felt bad that I always cheered for like the villain. Like, even watching Black Panther, I cheered for Killmonger because he had some valid points.
That's exactly what I mean.
Like the city of Wakanda, they hid all this technology and hoarded it while their brothers and sisters were dealing with slavery and prejudice and all that. And it's like Killmonger was one of the people who dealt with that on the outside because he was an outcast from Wakanda.
I agree, because he said something about, like, while you guys are living rich up here, there's over 2 million of us out here suffering and stuff like that. He brought up some very strong valid points,
Right, and then still, even at the end, they just what Wakanda did was like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. They opened up a facility in Oakland, and but that was it. Like, they're not going any further. They're still hoarding their resources.
Well, the one thing that you're going to recognize, that's where the comic world is a lot different from the book world. The movies and the books tell sometimes different stories, because there's a Black writer by the name of Evil Ewan, and she took the run of Black Panther right after John Ridley did. And John Ridley ended the Black Panther going into an exile. And so in that exile, Evil Ewan took over the title, but what she did was she laid a whole new layer, a foundation of Wakanda. So instead of focusing on the royalty in the big cities and stuff like that, she went into the ghettos. She went into the criminality. She actually went into just basic folks that lived in Wakanda, which you got a chance to embrace a whole different foundation of Wakanda. And a lot of people criticized her story arc for not having an abundance of action in there, but if you look at the story arc that she did, it's brilliantly written, because when the next writer gets the baton passed down to him to write a Black Panther story arc, they got so much more to work with. What I'm saying? They got the ghettos, they got this criminal over here, they got this aspect over here, and then even John Ridley created a guy by the name of Tosin who has vibranium in his bloodstream. So he, oh no, real incredible guy. I got a CGC over at the Comic Den, so if you guys want to come get
Oh
it.
yeah, I gotta check that out now.
But they started laying new layers to Wakanda, which made Wakanda not just more interesting by adding more character and character foundation, but they added more foundation to Wakanda. So now you can look beyond the royal city.
Yeah, giving the story more depth.
Exactly, because I think Wakanda's a republic now.
Yeah,
because they exiled the Black Panther from being king, dude. So that was one of the struggles
It's
that
crazy.
went through. Yeah, dude. Like I said, the stories in the movies compared to the comics. I was just talking to someone about that in the store today. I was like, the reader of the comic has so much more in-depth knowledge of a character, that you'll see in the movie. I'm glad to see people who see the movie, who comes inside the store, that are interested in getting more depth about the character, because there's so much more than what the character has to offer than in the movies. And, what someone was also saying to me was like, well, what about this origin of this? And I said, sometime the movie origin, because it's made in reality, it'll make a different type of sense compared to how some of the writers brought in some story arcs or created some supervillains and stuff like that. It came from like a fantastic way of thinking, an abnormal, a unique situation, but when the movies do it, it kind of brings it to more of a common sense standard, you
Right.
know? And that's the only thing I can say when you're watching a movie about a character or a superhero that's compared to some of the comic book actual story arcs and origins to some characters.
Yeah, because Spider-Man, there's different aspects of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
The first one I grew up on, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, he shot his web through his wrist.
Organically, yes.
Then it's like you got Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland who have their own web shooters.
Right. And what that was, when you think about it, you can look at that from 2 points of views. Yes, Tobey Maguire was more of an organic spider because he got bitten by a spider and he took on the traits of a spider, but also like Peter Parker's considered a scientist, a very genius scientific mind. So you can even say, okay, I got this organically, or this guy is so smart with the enhancements of his spider's ability, he took his smarts and he was able to create web shooters and stuff like that. So the original Peter Parker I kind of appreciate more because it shows a smarter side of him when he's able to solve scientific equations and scientific anomalies and stuff like that because of how he was brought up and the genius that he had coming up in school.
And it was also hilarious. In what was it? Not Into the Spider-Verse. Never Coming Home.
Oh, No Way Home.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, I got you web shooters. You got web shooters," and he just shot the web out of his wrist. Like, that came out of you. That was hilarious.
Yeah, there was a difference, but you see, that's the beautiful part about like where comics are taking now. And the cool part about it is that DC like mastered this like way before Marvel did.
They did.
When they had all these multiversal characters and like different versions and variants of these characters. But now, since Marvel is at the top of the food chain when it comes to these movies, they actually dug into the multiverse, and now you see these different versions of Spider-Man, and they actually brought those characters together, which I thought was very good. I thought it was very genius the way that they did that, because I love seeing Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland together.
Yeah, because we never got like a finishing for Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
And you never really got a finish of Tobey Maguire, you know what I'm saying? Because they ended, like, they could have carried on. I mean, because the only thing that happened at the end was that Harry Osborn died, and, we never got deeper into the Venom. I think they could have did so much more, with characters like Venom, my dude. It's like, you don't write him off in one comic book. I mean, in one movie. You don't do that, you know what I'm saying? Because he's a phenomenal character. It's just like in the last Venom movie when they introduced Null. I crossed my fingers when I was watching that movie with my son. I was like, you cannot make Noel get defeated in one movie. He's too much of an extinction level villain. You know.
Yeah, Noel was an issue in the comics.
Exactly. It took the whole Marvel universe to defeat this guy.
Yeah.
You know, and for you to introduce him in a movie and just think that Venom is going to beat him, dude. No, that wouldn't go fly very well.
That's why I don't like when it comes to Marvel movies. I didn't like when Sony made them like Morbius. I was kind of like here and there with Morbius. Madam Web, I was here and there with that. Kraven the Hunter though. Kraven the Hunter. They need to add him to the MCU.
Well, that was good, but you see, the only thing about that, in my opinion, I like that movie. I'm not gonna lie. The action, the Kraven wasn't bad, but if you want to make Kraven a good guy, that's the perfect movie to go with. It's that Kraven the Hunter. But man, Kraven is a beast, dude. Kraven has a sinister mind. Kraven is one of Spider-Man's one of his most major enemies, you know. And
Kraven's main goal was to kill Spider-Man and put him on a mantle.
Yeah. You know, one of his well, I'm drawing a blank of the story arc. What is the name of it? But I know he had captured Spider-Man, put him in the grave for like 5 or 6 days, and he took the role of Spider-Man. And this was back in the days when Spider-Man had the black costume, you know. And, I'm trying to Manhunt or something like that. But I know it was one of Craven's most deepest issues with Spider-Man. And the story arc was so impactful. It was drawn by a guy named Mike Zeck. I do remember that. And the thing that when that story arc ended, Kraven ended up taking a shotgun and doming himself in the mouth. You know what I'm saying?
Because he saw how hard it was to be Spider-Man.
Just the whole exhibit of him taking on that role because he wanted to be Spider-Man to understand how Spider-Man kept defeating him, what moved him, what drove him and stuff like that. And being a hunter, he had to try to find out that side of Spider-Man. And then when he found out about it, he found out things about himself that he didn't like, you know.
Yeah, I like that. You know what? I like that.
You know, dude, I got so many comics rolling around in this brain of mine, so many story arcs, so many names and stuff. Like I said, dude, I've been doing this for like, man, gee, I'm gonna be like 55 this year. I got my first book when I was 5, dude. 50 years, you know what I'm saying? And then I started knowledging books when I was in junior high school. So I probably got about 40 years of damaged brain running around here with all these issues running around in my head, and not just personal issues, comic book issues. You know, because I always tell people, man, you got more issues than Superman got comics. Because Superman and Batman are the first characters. Action and detective comics are the first books that hit 1,000 issues. You know? I mean, they're both approaching 1,100 right now. And then Spider-Man is in they keep starting him over. They just started a new Spider-Man story arc last week now, with a Spider-Man #1, but his legacy number is in the 960s, you know. So he's about 30-something issues away from hitting 1,000.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, dude.
They've been out for. It's like I'm 34, so it's like they've been out longer than I've been alive.
Oh yeah, man. I think, man, if I'm not mistaken, I know Superman and Batman is like 85. You know what I'm saying? They'll be approaching the 90 years probably soon.
Well,
you know?
the Kryptonians don't age.
Yeah. But I mean, think about it. Superman came about in 1939, I believe.
Yeah, April 18th, 1939.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time. Batman not too far right behind him. So when you really think about the longevity of their characters, they're lasting almost 100 years. And this is where I've taken this passion to try to take this level of comics to another level. This is why I take this to schools, you know. I get invited to elementary, middle schools, and some high schools. And I tell kids, you know, I don't try to, you know, take away if their parent is raising them to be something else or something like that. But I tell a kid, I was like, your most God-given ability is the ability to create, you know what I'm saying? To create a world, to create a foundation, to create characters and give them life. And then once you give those characters life and you sell those characters and have other people believing in those characters breathe through those characters. Because I've read Superman, Spider-Man books, and I've been more interested into what happened to Mary Jane or Jimmy Olsen and stuff like that, because that book brings life, you know, and it leaves a legacy behind in the art form of comics, you know, because somebody actually took the time out to create this guy in this red and blue costume and this red cape on and stuff like that. And that created fictional character is now alive, but we're not just talking about that character. We're talking about his job. We're talking about his parents. We're talking about his villains. We're talking about his personal issues. There's a black writer by the name of Christopher Priest. He wrote this story last year called Superman Lost. It's one of the best Superman stories you can ever read, dude. Superman got caught in the time paradox for about 20-30 minutes, but when he got out of the paradox, he was actually trapped in space for 20 years. Ooh. So to Lois, he looked like he's normal, but he said, I've been gone for 20 years. And literally, like, he was so depressed. I never saw that side of Superman, you know, where he was laying in bed and he was just like, you know, like broken, you know, because everything that he experienced in that 20 years, you know, had affected him, you know. And the genius of this black writer, Christopher Priest, which is the same guy who wrote the Black Panther that created the Dora Milaje. I mean, just a genius mind Christopher Priest did. He actually created a time paradox where that older branded Superman was able to reach that Superman right before that paradox turned him into the Superman that he was. He said, "You go back to Lois. You're the Superman that's supposed to be with her. I'm not him. You know, I've gone through 20 years of mayhem and different planets and dealing with different issues and stuff like that. But the journey is absolutely amazing, though, man. I mean, and I just like to see black writers come with different stories that you never really seen this character experience and go through. It's the first time I ever seen Superman go through mental health issues, like on that level, dude. I was like,
you know what? I think a lot, like, being a superhero, you're gonna go through some mental health issues.
Cody Ziegler is a black writer. He writes Miles Morales Spider-Man, and he writes Deadpool. He's the first writer I ever did a reel on to where I saw Miles Morales have a breakdown in tears and stuff like that, going through mental health issues because he was going to school. He was trying to, you know, be a successful student. He was going through having girl problems. You know, he was having problems at school with his grades and stuff like that. But the one thing that he had every villain down his neck, dude, trying to kill him. You know what I'm saying? So that's the icing on the cake right there.
Like, you the new Spider-Man.
Exactly.
Like, we got, like, they gonna think you're an easy target.
Exactly, dude. But Miles is no joke, dude. But the one thing that I learned through that whole thing is that, you know, the writer provided coping mechanisms, you know, because his parents knew he was Spider-Man, so he had parental support. He went out there and he got mentors. Missy Knight, you know, was one of his mentors. You know, he had a relationship with his girlfriend. So when there was this one issue where they got him bawling, crying, like when all this stuff comes down on him, but he had his family there with him. You know, and I try to tell people when I go to mentorships and stuff like that, when you're going through things like that, don't go through it alone, you know, because you read a comic book, go on the journey that the writer takes you on. And that writer, today's writers are so smart. I mean, you got screenwriters, you got psychiatrists, you have doctors, you have lawyers that are writing comic books nowadays, you know what I'm saying? So if you follow some of what these guys are giving you in the story arcs, they're actually giving you coping mechanisms to go through certain issues and stuff like that.
I feel it. My coping mechanism is going to the comic store and just buying comics.
Well, that's always worked for me, man.
Yeah,
that feels, lie, dude.
That feels a whole depression because it's like I love just reading, like, even graphic novels. Like, the longer the better. So what do you think of the state the MCU, well, superhero movies in a whole, DC and MCU? What do you think the current state that they're in? How do you feel about it?
Okay, I know a lot of people, man, if they listen to this, they're going to probably agree or disagree with me on this. But I look at it like this, though. You know, so I think James Cameron said the superhero movies are on their way out when he was doing his whole Avatar thing. I totally disagree with him on that.
Scorsese said the same thing.
You know, and I think as long as you make just like a good comic book writer, a good movie is going to keep that thing alive. However, I go back to where it all started. I look back at Christopher Reeves being Superman and Michael Keaton being Batman. DC started this, dude. You know what I'm saying?
They did have
if you really want to look at who really kicked superhero movies off into gear was, I would say, with the first two Supermans, the one with Richard Pryor, and then the Superman: The Quest for Peace. The Quest for Peace was like the worst thing you can ever want to watch. You know what I'm saying? But I like Richard Pryor. I'm a big Richard Pryor fan. So, you know, when I saw Superman, Christopher Reeves, and Richard Pryor going together, I track with that movie, you know. But the when Michael Keaton became Batman, dude, you know, I was like, man, and Jack Nicholson, the Joker, and then Penguin, Danny DeVito, and all those movies, dude, I was like, wow, man, this is like, man, I had a whole new respect for like superhero movies. And then Marvel was trying to do movies at that time, but they were all like low budget. I mean, they did a Captain America movie where the Captain America mask had plastic ears on and stuff like that. Dude, it was just like god awful bad, you know what I'm saying? But not until New Line Cinema came out with Blade the Vampire Hunter. A lot of people don't understand. Blade the Vampire Hunter, Wesley Snipes, is the first real Marvel movie to really kick things into gear for Marvel.
I've been telling people that.
You know what I'm saying?
I've been telling
in my
people
opinion,
that.
some people might not track with that, but that's the truth, though, dude. You know what I'm saying? Those are the movies that kick Marvel in. Then you got to see movies like, you know, the X-Men and Spider-Man and Daredevil and all that kind of stuff. And then they finally came out with this whole MCU thing. But it was Blade the Vampire Hunter that
kicked
really you could say was the first high-quality Marvel movie, Marvel character that ever, like, that was launched and made them stand on a strong plateau, dude.
Right.
Now, with all that being said, you know, I'm looking at DC as an underdog now, but I really feel good about what James Gunn is doing for DC. I think this new Superman movie is going to knock it out the park.
Oh, the
I think it's going
previews
to
were
put DC
beautiful.
back on the map again, and that, in my opinion, DC deserves to be just as competitive with Marvel as they should be. Right now, in the comic books, you have the Ultimate Universe that's created by Marvel, which is phenomenal, with Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther, Ultimate X-Men, the Ultimates, you know, Ultimate Wolverine, which is a hybrid of the Winter Soldier and Wolverine, you know. Then you have DC, who killed it, dude, with Scott Snyder's Ultimate Batman, Scott Snyder's Absolute Batman, Jason Aaron's Absolute Superman, and Stephanie Phillips, I think she wrote the Absolute Wonder Woman. All three of those are must-read titles, dude. I can't keep those in my store. I sell out of them 6-1 every time, you know, because when somebody pick up number 6, they want to get number 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, you know. So
yeah, because their stories are way different from what they came up with.
Off the chain good. And then they're launching their second wave, you know, because now that started off with you have Ultimate I'm sorry, I'm getting these mixed up.
Oh, Absolute Flash,
Absolute Martian Manhunter, and Absolute Green Lantern. And of those three, I think the best read is probably like the Absolute Martian Manhunter. And that's the same guy who writes for Marvel. His name is Dennis Camp, dude. That's such a mystery right there. And then I give second place to Al Ewing's Absolute Green Lantern, and then I give the third place to Flash, because I haven't really tracked with Flash, but I know Jeff Lemire is a great writer, so maybe by the second or third issue, we'll start to see the foundation that he's laying down.
Yeah, Absolute Flash, in this one, he doesn't use the Speed Force per se.
It looked like they're creating the Speed Force or something
like that.
Yeah,
something like that.
So it looked like they're, like I said, these are, like, if you're a new reader, I always suggest Absolute or Ultimates to somebody. Absolute is a little, the Ultimates is a little more deeper in than the Absolute, but I bought the trade paperbacks just to get people started. I say, if you want to start with a new, interesting, up-to-date, just a completely new aspect of a character, go with the Absolute or the Ultimate Universe. Now, you know, Marvel and DC just, you know, shook hands and they're getting back together on possibly making Marvel DC comic books again.
Really?
Yeah, but I'll go out and say this again. Nothing will make me happier than a store owner, a comic book collector, and a big fan of the art, of the community, than for them to say Absolute Universe against Ultimate Universe, dude. Because, dude, that'll probably be the highest
grossing book.
And then it'll probably be my biggest purchase as a comic book. I mean, because I'm buying those books, dude, in abundance, man. Because I will personally push that because I think that would just be a fan favorite right now.
I definitely will. My little cousin, I got him hooked up comics with the New 52 version.
Okay.
So like the New 52 Batman, Nightwing, Superman.
New 52 Batman never changed any continuity.
Yeah.
There was 2 books out of that whole run where the characters changed no continuity, and that was Batman and that was Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Well, you could say Green Lantern a little bit because they made Sinestro like the Green Lantern of the New 52. He had kind of took in Hal Jordan's role and stuff like that.
Yeah, because he already used to be a Green Lantern.
Exactly.
And then when something happened, he happened to be the first Yellow Lantern. That's why they called it the Sinestro Corps.
Yeah. And for a while they made Jessica Cruz a Yellow Lantern. I thought she's going to stay a Yellow Lantern because it kind of fit her role for fear better than her being a Green Lantern. But they said that she's more of a base Green Lantern, which I respect that. Her willpower to overcome fear is pretty strong.
Yeah, I think the only ones that really can... Like, Kyle Rayner and Hal Jordan are really the only 2 that could probably weld the rings of the emotional spectrum.
Right, but the one who really stands out as one of the strongest Green Lanterns, which a lot of people are starting to recognize now, is John Stewart.
Oh, John Stewart.
Yeah.
When they first introduced John Stewart, I'm like, oh, they got a brother.
Yeah.
Walking around with this ring.
Yeah, he's the one. And then they created Simon Bass, who's kind of like one of the first Muslim Green Lanterns, and he carried a pistol around when he first became.
Yeah, Batman convinced him to give up his pistol. Yeah. Like you have the ring, you don't need the pistol. That leads to you losing your willpower.
Yeah, so I was like, man, everything has its edge, but once you come across characters once you meet one of the big 3, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, they gonna heal you down a little bit.
Yeah, because they've been in the game forever.
Yeah, I call those I think a lot of people say that's the Trinity though. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, man.
Because what'd you think of the Batman Superman movie versus Superman movie? When they first came out, I'm like,
Well, you see, I think personally, the hype of it sold phenomenally over the weekend. But once a lot of people started to see the movie, they started to say, because that's what happened to me. I actually went to go see it twice.
Yeah.
I had to go see that I really have the opinion that I had about the movie that I had, So I will say this. It's not the worst movie, but it's not one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And I will say this also. That Batman scene where Batman went to go rescue Superman's mom, that's one of the hardest Batman scenes you'll ever find on any cinematic platform.
Yeah,
that Batman was Batman right there.
Yeah, that showed the Batman, I don't kill, but I'll send your ass to the hospital.
Yeah, you see, that was Batman I wanted to see more of. You see, the thing I didn't like about... I respect the Snyderverse to a degree, but I don't, you know what I'm saying? Because I talk highly about how Batman and Superman don't kill. I use those guys as pure examples on how the easy thing is not always, how the right thing is not always easy to do. I mean, that's true in life, dude. Sometimes it's easy to go do something bad, go sell this or go do this or hurt that person or just fall into your anger. But to have that moral stability, that moral compass to say, you know what, I'd rather walk this longer road and do the right thing, you know, that takes character, that takes strength. You know, and when Superman broke Zod's neck, I say that's not the Superman. I told my son, I was like, that's a different version of Superman, because Superman would not have broken Zod's neck, the Superman that I grew up with.
Because the Christopher Reeve Superman sent his ass to the film zone.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and even in that situation when he was using like those laser eyes, that he would have just flew him into space or something like that. Man.
Yeah,
just figured out another way besides killing. And then when Batman was a cold killer in the Snyderverse, dude. He was killing.
Oh yeah,
everybody,
when they show like what happened after Darkseid got the anti-life equation, where it's just a barren wasteland. He's shooting people.
Oh yeah, but then even before that, if you saw, he was branding people, dude. He had that machine gun, and then the Batmobile, dude. He was a killer, dude.
Yeah, he was a killer.
And I think that I was just talking to somebody about that today in the store. I was like, that Joker is probably like a Jason Todd or a Tim Drake Joker or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I believe that the Joker that was his age, he probably did end up killing or something like that, because that Batman went through something that kind of changed him into that killing format. But Superman and Batman, dude, they don't kill. I mean, if you watch the Injustice saga, when Superman killed the Joker, you know,
yeah, that's how it all started.
The rift between Batman and Superman, because Batman was like, "No, dude, we don't do this." You know, and he betted the Joker that Superman wouldn't kill him. You know, even though the Joker killed his baby and killed his wife, and all that kind of stuff,
Lois,
he said, "Man, that is the most moralist man that I know, man. He's not going to do it." And the Joker was like, "Man, you don't know what wouldn't work on you might not work. What was going to work on him." And I was like, "Man, he broke Superman."
Yeah, and it's true, because it's like Batman is, at the end of the day, Batman is human.
Yep.
Superman may look human, but at the end of the day, he is a alien with super strength and all these other powers. You piss him off, he don't have to do much to kill you, but he can.
Exactly. You know, and that's the one thing I always harp on about. I was like, the dude got the power to rule the world. You know, if he wanted to just be a Highlander type of villain,
right? Like, what's gonna stop him from ripping the roof off the White House?
Exactly. You know, but dude just want to be a good husband, a good father, and a good son. At the end of the day, man, hold down his job.
He's trying to be one of us. Like,
exactly.
He like came into the shit as a baby, and it's like he only knows how to be a human, even though he's different. That's all he knows.
You know, and his ability to just make those hard decisions to do the right thing no matter what, that takes character, dude. You know what I'm saying? So even as an alien, you know, they gave that guy more character than your average human does, you know?
Yeah. But I kind of like the whole Injustice saga. Like,
I do too, dude.
It broke my heart that he killed Shazam. Like, you just killed an 11-year-old boy. Like, no matter if he has the power to turn into a grown-ass man, you killed an 11-year-old boy.
Well, you know, I think that added oomph to the story arc, you know, because, look, you didn't like it, you know what I'm saying? So it impacted certain readers.
It made me want to read more of it.
And that's why they do stuff like that, dude. Sometimes that stuff is just to draw you on in, man, to make the story arc more interesting.
Oh, yeah. All right, so we have like a question we ask all our interviews. We do over or under. Okay. So I'm gonna name a couple of things, and you can tell me if you're going over in spending this year or under.
Okay. All
right. So, comic books, over or under $1,000?
Over.
Oh, dead. Yeah. Funko Pops, over or under? We'll do like 500.
Under.
Okay.
But as a bookstore owner, over. But as a personal collector, under, you know.
All right, video games. Whether it's a console or like the game, over or under 700?
Over.
Oh, damn.
We got PlayStation Pro.
Oh.
Yeah, so. Yeah. My son, I grew up a video game geek. You know, I give my son whatever video game system he wants, man. You know. So.
What's your favorite video game?
My favorite video game right now, honestly, I'm a Marvel vs. Capcom guy, so I play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 a lot when I can play games, and then I love games like God of War and Devil May Cry. Oh, and I can't leave out the Spider-Man games or the Batman Arkham. I can go on a rant about
the Arkham series. Yeah,
any like good RPG like that. But I'm a basic fighter though, dude. When I used to play games competitively, it was with Street Fighter and Tekken.
Or Mortal Kombat.
I wasn't as good as Mortal Kombat, but I did master how to do fatalities.
Though. I've played Mortal Kombat since I was a kid, and still don't know how to do fatalities.
No, dude, I had to learn those fatalities. Man.
Like, I had to write it down, like left, right, and then it tells you have to be a certain distance from the person to do the fatality.
Well, that was the fun part about figuring out. Then you had to hit the left down and stuff like that. But Mortal Kombat got a cool game. I want to play with Conan the Barbarian that they just released not that long ago.
Yeah, they have Peacemaker on there too.
Yeah, I got those. I got Omni-Man. I got Highlander. I got all those guys. You know, the only thing since I've been running the store, I just don't have the time to game like I used to, man.
Have you played Marvel Rivals?
I watched my son play it.
I like the concept of the game. It's just how the characters look weird.
Well, the thing about that, as a bookstore owner, the first 5 issues, one Spider-Man, there's a Storm cover. All those books are worth $30 to $50 because they were Marvel rival cover variants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You see, comic books is a unique science, dude. You know what I'm saying? You gotta know what's hot and what's not, you know.
Right.
And whatever particular cover is hot, you can sell that book for $4 one day and $50 the next day.
Yeah, due to like the variant, like we have this variant, like we got a pixel variant cover. Oh yeah.
I've seen variant covers the next day. You know, Ultimate Spider-Man was a unique book, you know, because I do this thing called Walk the Wall Wednesday, and I much love the Golden Apple comics, because if it wasn't for Golden Apple comics, I don't think I would be where I am right now. But I would do this thing called Walk the Wall Wednesday, and when I walked the floor that day, dude, they had so many Absolute Spider-Mans on the wall, all these variant titles. So by the time I get halfway home, I get a call like, oh man, Ultimate Spider-Man and Spike, dude, you better go and grab you some more. So I grabbed 2 to 3 covers. I drove back, and under a 20-minute time period, the shelves were wiped out.
Damn.
And then Ultimate Spider-Man #1 right now, the regular edition is worth $75 for #1. And then some of the variants are $50 to $25, dude. Ooh. And those books, Ultimate Spider-Man first printings are very valuable comic books to have your hands on, dude.
I'm about to go shopping.
Yeah, so you never know. You see, the thing about comics now is you never know what you're sitting on, you know. You might buy something thinking it's just a cool character right now, you know, but the right movie, the right hype, the right drive, the right story arc or anything like that will send a $4 book to a $400 book. We'll send a $4 book to a $40 book. We'll send a $4 book to a $100 book, you know. And you just never know what you have your hands on sometimes. Who would have thought Peacemaker? Peacemaker was a Charleston comic character, dude, who books were like in a low value. They wasn't high value. They were only high value because of the age that they came out in.
Yeah, I've never heard of
John
Peacemaker.
Cena became Peacemaker. Everybody wanted to know who Peacemaker was, which increased that first appearance to where it went up significantly. I mean, you can
to the point where you got a show now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right after the movie you just shot.
Exactly, and don't go get your book graded CGC, dude. I got a Spider-Man 300 I bought in 1988. I think that book was probably like $1.99, $2 at the $3 at the max. You know, if I'm trying to, that book in newsstand edition right now is worth $800. So you just imagine if you're saving the first appearance of Miles Morales, dude. You bought it for $4. That book is spiked up and down. The highest I've seen it is $500 to $600 ungraded. You know, up to $800. You know, it's just, and if you get it graded, that'll turn an $800 book to almost a $2,000 book. You know, it's independent on the grade that it is.
Yeah.
So you got to know your comics. And the thing is, people bring me comics collections, and I had a guy that brought me a valuable collection, but the books were in such awful condition. And when I tried to explain to him, like, you got some good books, but the conditions of your books are low graded, I was like, and I'll show you, like, 500 low grade, $15. You see what I'm saying? So it's always good to take care of your comics, dude. Put them in bags and boards and stuff like that, because that's the only way you'll retain the maximum capacity and the maximum value of that book.
And also, like,
this is in my DNA, dude. This is what I do, man.
And also, like, keep your comic. Like, I used to do it with my Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and my comics. I ended up unfortunately losing all of them in a house fire.
Oh, dude, yeah, that's bad, man. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, this happened years ago, but like, I always kept mine in like a book, because it's like you may never know how much these shits is worth when you get older.
No, you don't. No, the Star Wars, man, I used to collect when I was a kid. I was at a convention watching people sell these same Star Wars characters out of Ziploc bags for $700 to $800, dude.
Yeah, they always say though, don't take it out the box.
But even in a Ziploc bag, you can buy like a Hoth Luke Skywalker for like $500 or something like that, dude.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying? And then somebody came in the other day, dude. He showed me a picture. When I was a kid, I don't know if I might be aging myself, but it used to be this show called The $6 Million Man out. Steve Austin.
He had the red jumpsuits.
Yeah, and they redid a comic book on him that was very good. But dude, I used to have the one where you look through the back of the head with the bionic eye. This dude whipped out a brand new one on me in the box. He showed me a picture of it, dude. He's like, I got almost every vintage the action figure or that you can think of. When he whipped that out, dude, it was over for me right there. I was like, oh, dude, you got this still in the box? I'm like, you sitting on a gold mine, dude. And there's some collectors out there that are sitting on some major stuff, dude.
And they don't even know it.
No, some of them know.
Some of them know, but some of them don't even like. They just
see the one thing you don't want to happen is, God forbid one of these collectors pass away and the wife or family members just want to get rid of that stuff to clear real estate out the house, and they bring it to a Goodwill or a guy like me, and then because I always ask the person what do they want. I never throw a price out there. I want to see what the person wants. So if they say, oh, give me $200 or $300 for it, what I'm saying, and you dig out $3,000 or $4,000, you know what I'm saying? I gave the person what they wanted, you know what I'm saying? And they walked away happy, but I was able to fish out some stuff that really would profit the business, though.
Right.
Hold on, please don't switch battery.
Are we going too far, dude? We overdoing it, man?
No, y'all doing great. Y'all are great. I am learning so much. Now I'm getting some backstories of some of my favorite comics.
What are your favorite comics back
I like
here?
Kraken. Kraken was dope.
Kraken.
Kraken. Craven. My bad.
Craven.
Oh, Craven. Yeah, Craven. Dude, Craven was, Craven, dude, if I can remember that, I think it was called Manhunt, dude. One of the best Craven stories I ever read, dude.
On you, Red.
For sure. All right, so
we got to go back to the over and under thing, man. I know I went on one of my video game rants, dude, because you got to talking about games, man. I used to be such a diehard gamer, with being mixed with a comic book collector, man.
Oh yeah, well that's the territory. Like you like everything comes together. Cause it's like, have you been like Comic-Con?
Oh yeah. I go. This was the first year I didn't go to Comic-Con, where I literally had the leverage of writers like Jamal and Nancy, artists like Marcus, dude. And I've met so many people since I opened up the store. And they're like, dude, you coming. We represent the Comic Den up here, man. We telling people about you. I had Sebastian Jones, who has an amazing comic company called Stranger Comics. He actually wanted me to come up there and push his envelope in my envelope. He invited me up there. So I technically have had so much leverage since I've opened up this store. It's been such a blessing, man. I'm not gonna lie. I just really feel like this was my calling. This is something that I was meant to do, was be this bookstore owner. I feel like I was built for this because my years of managing stores, because I've managed everything from CVS to Big Lots. I've ran a Vons. I've ran Michael's Arts and Craft. That was my last company I worked for before I created the Comic Den. And so all that building, learning inventory management, learning service and stuff like that came into my own business with me. And so far we just been doing very, very well. I couldn't be happier working, doing anything else with my life right now.
Oh yeah. It's like when I first came up there, I'm like, damn, I feel like I was back 12 years old. Cause I used to go to this comic book shop off of Melrose.
Golden Apple.
Yes.
Yeah, that's that. Much love to Golden Apple, because Golden Apple helped make me who I am, dude. You know what I'm saying? And I give much love to Ryan and Sharon Leibowitz, but my girl, and they know if they ever see this video, is Sharon Leibowitz, the first lady of comic book stores. That lady used to make me feel like I was the only person in that store, dude. There's never been an artist or a writer that she wouldn't take me to personally meet. She just treated me and made me feel so special. And that's kind of like how I try to make my customers feel when they come in there. I give everybody my most undivided attention, man.
I fuck with that. I remember. Well, you mentioned earlier you renting out your spot for the show, the comic book shop.
Well, I'm not really allowed to tell a lot about that, but Yeah, one of the things that helped our business flourish was I met a young lady by the name of Cheyenne, and she's called Cheyenne the Geek. She found out that I was a black comic book store owner, and she's doing a TV show about a black comic book store owner. And we just met each other, and we just was just like two relatives, not seeing each other for a long time. We just connected and stuff like that. And ever since I met her, things started to really excel as far as the store. I gained more followers and stuff like that. And it's one thing I can always say: you don't have to meet 100 people, do you? Just need to meet the one right one, and they'll help you meet 100 people, do. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of like the personal experience that I had from meeting Cheyenne.
I feel that because that's how I found out about your comic book store. I seen a video of her being there. I'm like, this is a comic book store, and right near my dad's old house too. I'm like, damn, driving distance. I ain't got
right under your nose, huh?
Like I ain't gotta go too far for one. So like I just pulled up. I'm like, and yeah, I feel like I was just 12 years old again. I'm like, I'm gonna go broke walking in here.
Yeah, I remember when you came in, man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, when I saw it, I was like, wait a minute. I say, oh, yeah, all right, man, the Dennison. That's what we call our comic, because the store's called a Comic Den, so we call our Comic Den and our pull list customers Comic Dennisons. We're trying to come up with little names, and, I'm building my website where people can shop on Shopify and get their books shipped to them, or they can come to the store and pick them up. So we're learning all the aspects of what your average comic book store has, and as time keeps progressing, I'm gonna get us right there.
Yeah, because I told my cousin, he was like, they got Spawn.
I got plenty of spawns.
Yeah, I told him, he was like, oh yeah, I need Rat City.
I got Rat City, dude.
Yeah.
I got all that stuff, man. I don't miss out on a beat. I mean, I've had people come to me with unique story arcs, and a lot of people come to me with stuff like back in the days, and I tell them, I was like, I have it. I have that book. I mean, I have thousands and thousands on books, but not everything is in that store. You know what I'm saying? If I wouldn't be able to get you through the door as good if I took everything that I had and tried to put it into the store. I have a lot of boxes of comics. And I know people with even more boxes than I have. I mean, I've met people with collections so impressive, dude. It's like they need a warehouse to fill up their comics.
Oh,
their collection.
shit.
Yeah, I met a guy named Rob. Like, he sent me a picture of where some of his collection. I was like, dude, is that a warehouse where your books are? He's like, I was like, whoa, dude. I was like, I feel like small peanuts now. You know what I'm saying? I thought I was sitting on a large collection.
Oh. Was it hard to get your location?
It was, that location was a blessing, but getting other locations was very hard. It was hard just trying to get a company to give a black man a small business loan to open up a comic book store. You know what I'm saying? That right there was a mission in itself. As a matter of fact, I didn't get a loan. I saved up money. I took investments, and I built that comic book store from, my own blood and sweat, because I would go to get... I would go try to get small business loans, and they always ask you for collateral. They ask you for all this stuff that I didn't have at the time. So, and I promised my son, I met this guy that worked at Marvel Studios some years ago. And, because I take care of my mom and he take care of his mom, and we kind of vibed on that. And I remember I said, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I work for CGI at Marvel Studios. And this was right between Infinity War and Endgame. So I was like, dude, what is that like? He's like, man, I don't even feel like I have a job sometimes. He said, sometimes 12, 13-hour days, we're having so much fun, they just go by. And I was like, I looked at my son, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to raise you like that, man. So I told my son, I was like, man, if you want to play the violin for a living, I just want you to be the best violinist that's out there that the world has seen, and I just want you to enjoy your life and what you do. I said, then that way you don't feel like you have a job when you're working and you're earning money. I said, but I'm going to do one step above that. I said, you know what Daddy like a lot? Comic books. I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to lead by example. and I'm gonna open up a store. So instead of me going to buy a new car and always going to get new shoes and always going to get this or taking my bonus money and spending it and doing all this other stuff like that, I crunched all that money into investing to get this comic book store, dude. And I told my boss one year, I was like, man, you know I'm not gonna be here in July, August. All my manager friends, they was like, yeah, right, Joseph, you just full of crap. You always saying stuff. I was like, no, you hide and watch. I was like, you hide and watch. I was like, I'm gonna leave this company. I'm gonna start and lo and behold, I did it. Praise God. And now they're all looking like, you did it, man. My assistant manager sent a TikTok. That's my old boss right there. You know what I'm saying? Because they knew I knew I had to step into this next life because Russ Brown said something so impactful, dude. He said, just imagine you're on your deathbed and you look up and you got, let's just say 3 different versions of you sitting at your bed. And you're like, who are you? And he's like, well, I'm the you that should have opened up that comic book store. Who are you? I'm the you that should have invested in that house 5 years ago. Who are you? I'm the you that should have invested in Netflix when it first came out or something like that. And now you sit around with all these potential yous around you. But guess where they're going? They're going to the grave where you are. You know, and he said that's where all the untapped potential is. He said it's at the graveyard. Dude, that hit me so hard in the chest to where I looked and said, you know what? I said, if I got a potential me that can be a comic book store owner, I'm going to take that guy to bed with me. You know what I'm saying? That's the guy that's going to be laying down with me, and there's going to have to be some other versions of myself I'm going to have to deal with. You know what I'm saying? But that's a potential I'm not going to take to the grave with me, though, man. You know, I say I got gray on my face. I got less days ahead of me than more. I said I'm going to live those days out doing what I love to do. You know, and I was willing to put my job and everything out on the line, a risk. You know what I'm saying? And that's what life, you know, mainly people have to learn to take and stop being what we call tree huggers. You know, I was a tree hugger, dude. You know, I hugged onto the trunk of my 401k. I hugged onto the trunk of my benefits. I hugged onto the trunk of everything that I stood for as a store manager. You know, but the fruit grows out on the limb, man. You know what I'm saying? And you got to get out, you got to let go of that tree and take that risk and go out where the fruit is, man. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I did with this bookstore. I reached out where the fruit is, and so far, you know, so far so good. You know, I thank God for all this, you know, which is why I have Bible-based comic books in my store, which
I see.
a lot of bookstores, I haven't walked into a bookstore that does that, but I did that in homage to my Heavenly Father for blessing me to get that far. And I said, God, I will find a way to get your word in that comic book store, you know. So when I made that deal with Kingston Comics, you know, I told them, I was like, I'm going to buy enough to supply for the store. I got 3 churches around the store. I tell them I got comic books in the store that are Bible related from Genesis to Revelation. And it's just my way of saying, thank you, God. I'm going to put your word in my store, and that's how we're going to get down moving forward. As soon as you walk in, that's the first thing you see is the word of God in my store.
I feel that you have your biblical comics. You got your comics about the great black professional athletes, civil rights leaders. Like that's what that like. In addition to the comics, like I love to see that in black-owned stores. Like to pay homage to, you know, what got you there and the people that paved the way.
Yes, indeed.
Like I love it all.
Yeah, I have a section in there that I haven't taken down because I opened up the store in February for Black History Month, you know. So I was showcasing black writers, black artists, black characters, you know. So on one side of my showcase was just all black characters written by black writers or black artists. Then on the other side, I had characters like black writers who wrote like Superman or a character, but I haven't been able to take it down because whenever I'm talking to people about it, they just buy from it. You know what I'm saying? It's one. So I said, I'm not taking this down. You know what I'm saying? Because this area of this store really works for the community. You know, so I just use that to speak to the community and the different customers to come in there. And the cool part about it is this: even today, I had some people that came out here. I mean, I think they live close to San Francisco or something like that. But people actually have been making black couples, you know, husband and wives, families, make it a road trip to come to that store, man. You know what I'm saying? No, dude, it touches my heart. It deeply honors me to see people do that. They say, no, we made a promise. We saw you on Instagram, and we said we was on the freeway for 2 hours. A couple today, Curtis and Thomasina. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. But those two made a deliberate trip to come visit that store today. They both left with one left with a Comic Den T-shirt, but they spent a significant amount of money there, and they said you were our road trip, and they came out just to see that black-owned comic book store.
Yeah, when I make room in my room for more stuff, just know I'm gonna be buying. I seen the Red Hulk figurine you got in that glass display case. I need that somewhere in my room. Just gotta figure out where.
You know, I'm glad I'm selling statues, dude, because that was one I was crossing my fingers on. You know, because I could buy some statues that's worth $1,000, dude. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't want to go crazy on statues because there are some statues that are so beautiful. You have to put them together and stuff like that. And I said, well, I'm gonna buy some mid-price statues that I know people are gonna buy. And then I said, if I sell these, then I know that I can keep buying statues. So far, I've been selling statues pretty decently.
Yeah, I got my uncle Stan Lee. It was a Stan Lee statue. He's like sitting in a chair with a Spider-Man comic on his lap.
Oh, okay.
You gotta put it together. I got him the Infinity Gauntlet. Like that shit, we haven't put the Infinity Gauntlet together.
I raffled off an Infinity Gauntlet on my grand opening day, man. That turned out to be very, very. More people showed up than I had anticipated. It almost broke me down in tears, dude. I was so happy to see so many people show up and show out, dude.
Hey, I love it. We'll go close the interview. Do you have a affirmation or a quote that you live by?
Well, I do and I don't. I live off of a lot of things. I live strongly off the Word of God, but I always tell people this is what I live off of. The right thing isn't going to always be easy to do, and never be afraid to take risks, you know, because I'm learning as I move forward in this business. This was one of the biggest risks I ever took in my whole life. You know, I played it safe for so long, but sometime when you step out of that net and you go after what you really love to do, and once you get on the other side of that fear, you'll see that it wasn't nothing to be afraid of at all.
All right. And where can they find you at?
4912 West Slauson Boulevard. We are open pretty much 7 days a week, 12 to 5, Sundays and Mondays, 11 to 6 on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And on Wednesday, which is New Comic Book Day, we're open until 7 o'clock.
Okay, and where can you find you on social media?
You can find me under 2 spots. You can go under Joe Jam 0, or you can go under the Comic Den. You can also find us on TikTok and Pinterest.
All right, this is your boy Red Eye with his first fucking interview.
Yo, you can follow me on all platforms at SBRE_MF. And you can follow us at Straight Out the Trunk at SODTR_. And shout out to my boy Bakehead behind the camera. We out.